Who says poetry is dead? Look, bleachers are being filled up back there. Well, okay, I guess we're, can you all hear me? Is this working?
Yep.
Working well enough? All right, so I guess this thing is about to start then. All right, so let me say, before it starts, before I introduce first Melina Draper and then Caroline Manring, let me say a couple of things. One is, we're in the middle of just a cornucopia of poetry events. After tonight's reading, we have two more large-scale things. One is next week, we don't know which day, but stay tuned, word will come to you. Our Trias writer, Piotr Summer, is going to give a talk on, well, Piotr is not really going to say, but it's about, I would say it's a little bit about the depths. Hello, Jim Krenner. Hey. A little bit about the depths and a little bit about the heights. And then about the things in between those two as well. I'm guessing I'm probably pretty close. There, you see? He won't say.
No. I have to correct it. I don't know what he's saying, but what I am supposed to be doing is to give a craft talk. And so I guess what I'm going to really do is to say how one doesn't have a clue about talking about craft.
That's right. Okay. And then you're going to hear next week exactly what cluelessness turns into. Which, from my experience of Piotr's cluelessness, is that it's something quite wonderful and substantial. After that, there's going to be, the week after, a week of indie fiction. Kelly Link and Gavin Grant, who's a zine guy, and she's an indie fiction person. Wrote a great book called, what was it called? Magic, I'm suddenly blanking. Duh. Right. Magic Thinking? No. The Art of Magic? No. It's got magic in it. Does anyone know? Has anybody read it? Any of you people who like read things out of class, just pick stuff up? Nick, help us out here. Nick doesn't have, Nick actually has a lot, but not about this, I guess. Okay, so those are the things that are coming up. And the week of indie fiction will have a discussion about where fantasy fits into the world of fiction, because they're sort of fantasy writers. And then there will be also a craft talk, and they will give a reading as well. So lots of things in that last week. And maybe Chris Abani, our next Trias writer, the wonderful Nigerian-American fiction writer, poet, playwright, essay writer. Am I leaving anything out? Probably script writer. I mean, is there anything? What you should do if you want to get excited about next year is go on YouTube, look up TED Talks, put Chris Abani's name in, go watch his TED Talk. That'll do it for you. I think that'll take care of the whole thing. Okay, and he will be our fiction writer next year. Okay, so tonight we have two wonderful poets, Caroline Manring and Melina Draper. Both have books that are just out. Caroline's Manual for Extinction, okay, which I'm going to read from, and Melina's Later, The House Stood Still. And she will read from that and other things. And in addition, Melina's first book is a collaboration with her mom, the Argentinian poet, Elena Lafert. Elena, are you here? Yes, you're here. Please stand up. Everyone say hello to Elena. Yeah. Okay. And Place of Origin is the title of their collaboration together. Now, all of these books are for sale in the back after the reading, if you want. They're there for the taking. So actually, without further ado, I am going to invite Melina Draper to come up, and then Caroline will follow her afterwards. So everybody, Melina Draper.
Good evening, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here
thank you so much to Hobart and William Smith Colleges for hosting me and for all of you for coming out tonight. It's a great pleasure and honor to read with Carolyn and to read in front of my new friends and colleagues. I have one quick question for you all. I'm just curious how many of you are writers or aspiring writers or hoping to someday publish your own books or collections?
All right.
That's a modest.
I thought it might be interesting for you to hear a little bit about the process of how my books came to be, so I will be revealing a little bit more of the behind-the-scenes stories than I usually do. The first big project that I did was the collaboration that David referred to with my mother, and we live on different continents. She lives in South America, I live in North America, and we decided to do this collaboration as a way to stay in touch. And so we translated each other's work. She writes in Spanish, I write in English. So I thought I would just open with two of her poems tonight. The first one Something and Everything. Algo en todas las cosas. Algo se mueve, se estira, se desprende. Algo se refleja en algo, se enmascara de sí mismo. Cuenta tu historia. Something in everything. Something moves, stretches, comes unglued. Something reflects in something, masking itself as itself, telling your story. And this one is Debería haber plantado tomates. I should have planted tomatoes. En aladas galas caigo a un laberinto de paredes transparentes. Prodigio inútil haber labrado plumas en el confín de la materia. I should have planted tomatoes. In winged garments I fall into a labyrinth of transparent walls. Useless miracle to have sown feathers in the confines of matter. So the next project I embarked on was just a mishmash. I didn't know where I was going. I wrote many, many poems and was searching for a nucleus of a collection. And finally I came upon a series of poems that are set all along the Rio de la Plata, which is where my mother lives now in Uruguay. And she lives in Colonia, which you can see across the river. It's 50 kilometers, 30 miles. You can see the city of Buenos Aires on the horizon. And I spent some time there growing up when I was a kid. And I found myself just returning probably as another way to be back with my mother and reach out to my family and my roots. And so slowly this collection came together over a period of 3 intense years of writing, but the first poem was written in 2006, and it just came out. It's just out now, so it took a lot more intense concentration than I might have thought about at the outset. So I'm going to skip around a little bit in the collection, and I'll talk a little bit about how it came together as I go. This first poem I'm going to read is called Terra Incognita. And part of what I discovered as I was traveling in my mind and in my memories was that there had been other travelers that explored this region, including Charles Darwin. And he, several chapters in The Voyage of the Beagle chronicle his time along this coast in South America. And his letters are now available online and all of his notes. So I was also able to go there. And so I spent a lot of time reading his words and trying to understand. He himself is a fabulous prose writer. And so I could see how he turned his journals into the book. And that was an interesting project. So some of the images and lines come from his work. Limestone wafers shelved like moldering books, splintered centuries pressed into the continent's lip. This colonia quaffed blood, ingested gristle, guts, and bone. Into the mouth of the river, the vessel drove before her bows 2 billows of liquid phosphorus. Looking back, the crest of every wave was bright. The water, shook in a tumbler, shot sparks. He found butterflies that clacked, their sound similar to that of a toothed wheel passing under a spring catch. And what of the stories he heard, of the marvelous property of certain rivers, which had the power of changing small bones into large, of uprising Patagonia and Banda Oriental, where he found gigantic sloth and armadillo-like animals entombed, a lost pachydermata the size of a camel. Carlos Darwin observed, formerly it must have swarmed with great monsters, as the ancient maps suggested. Girl 9 runs errand. Take jug, take coin, lug jug, half block, cobblestone, cobblestone, squint in, almacén, hola, doña cucaracha. Bad teeth, loose grin, fill the dama Juana, por favor. Bubble, glub, glub, sharp, red, pungent sting. Coin give, take jug, lug jug, cobble wobble, stone step, door ajar, sizzle, shh, onions fry. Vino home, gracias, amor. So this next poem is called Mouth of the River, and this is the first poem that is the nucleus for what turned into the collection. It's the first one that was written. When I wrote it, I didn't know that it would be a 6-year project or 7-year project. Crackle and spit of fat on grills, asado, chorizo, in eucalyptus shade, Fanta naranja, invasive foxtails waving. I was a visitor in his country, too. Like a foreign language, I learned him, lick by lick, his salty palms. Scribbled into the world our tall friend, thin like a cartoon, slipped away. A bougainvillea spill of blossoms, the plum tree practically family. We made love in his hammock, riding the waves of a whale's spine, umbilical river, slow ocean feed, 40 feet of vertebra washed up on shore, and later moving sands exposed the tip of a dinosaur tail, this story and other bones. From the bark. While Darwin, landlubber, explored escarpments and thistlebeds, magical rivers, deposits of bone, Captain Robert Fitzroy kept their berth. Dear Philos, beloved, he wrote, excited by the letters skipping from ship to shore across the river. I will never write another letter after tea. That green beverage makes one tipsy. Beef for the crew, please, who are sounding the depths one lead weight overboard on a line at a time. Slow going to see what peaks and valleys lie beneath. Creatures of the deep appear in fossil, though not these. In jest, he tells him they await his return to assist in the parturition of a megalonyx measuring 72 feet from the end of his snout to the tip of his tail, and an ichthyosaurus somewhat larger than the beagle. Darwin, avis in navibus rarissima, not a strange bird, but a rare one, greeny about the jowls when aboard, striding happily on land, lamenting the sorry skull used as a target by the gauchos, not seeking adventure, but finding it, bringing it aboard in stories, wanting more. Beheld. I am tired of walking through the old barrio. All the Portuguese stone alleys descend to the river. When the rain comes down, I duck into the photographer's studio. An orange tom watches water running down the panes. Le digo chatran, says the man. I make a note to remember this forever. In a few minutes, the man takes a picture of my hairy leg up close. From the dark room, he tells me to drink some mate. Ear torn and dusty, the cat purrs when I scratch its head. Chatran. I feel I could stay here, like a stray come home. The man shows me the photograph. The rain stops and the sun streams in. Before I leave, I ask to see it once more. Winter mountain dotted with black spruce. His demeanor suggests I am beautiful. Some gossip I would have liked to tell her. Far from home, mid-river, 3 hours to cross on the slow ferry, I spotted the boy we'd once known. What a small world, I said. He did not smile, but nodded, angling his whole body toward his dapper friend. When I told him about the accident, how she died, he said he did not remember her, even though she desired him. She'd said it, nostrils quivering, bangles jingling, white collared shirt tightening against her tangerine breasts. About this, I said nothing. It appeared he was in love with his companion, and he did not remember me either. Two voices. A week after she died, the postman pushed her letter through the slot. I hear tell there used to be a lonely royal girl like me upon a time. What she sought, what she meant, I could not know. The taste of dance is on my tongue. My hair is loose, she wrote. Threads of stories set thrumming. There is yet one, her tears stitch gleaming pearls all night. There is yet one, I say. I am she who waits. Under every leaf I have looked, the lanes, the secret nooks. Now I look for her in Mira's poems. She says, a moment without you is no moment. I wait for a sign from God or ghost that does not come. To love one not earthly, this is the root of pain, my friend. She says, morning I make a list of elegant things. Says Mira, I count the stars, I wait for one pin of light. So this next one is called El Oreja. I returned to that town. The street dogs had been poisoned, and the man I loved no longer lived on the street of sighs. Nights I roamed for him. A rumor whispered he was dodging cops by the shore. A willow trailed into the river near the old fortress. I came upon the grave of a dog beloved of the townspeople. A photo wrapped in plastic, painted on the wall, the words, Oreja, el mejor de los perros. I knew him too, a large male with proud balls wandering alone. He used to sun himself in the convent ruins with other dogs. That place, now empty, smelled of moss and piss. Retorno. The church is new. Don Carlos saw the ruin of the old one blown to bits. Full of powder, struck by lightning, it lit good. What new ruin is this? Stout walls cordoned off, half buried near the new church, bridges linking me from here to there, bar across the street, hibiscus on the path. The church is full of old people. Who remembers me says, and where is your brother, your brother, your brother? Last time I walked here, this was not a store. The girl who snuck around at night like me still lives here. I saw her growing old. The photographer's companions knew. I wave and smile, wave and smile, wave and smile. This last one that I'm going to read from the book is called Coda, and then I'll finish by reading a couple of new poems. How do the Aymara conceive of the future behind and the past ahead? A woman gestures with her arm forward, meaning yesterday, last year. What she knows is what she's seen. I squint to see the past ahead. Tomorrow, unknown, is behind me. What a relief not to anticipate it. I am surrounded by the past, plural like old friends, a disagreement or two still festering. Toppled buildings stand in shadow where they were. Look, my friend's mother's at the door. He's not there, is there, batting Nescafe to a froth. We are at the pier fishing for mate. I like me there and there and there. I can see us sitting, our legs dangling down against the rocks. So, I don't know how many of you came to the reading last week with Joshua Beckham. I was really touched by his reading because he just shared some intimate details about his writing process and about things that motivated him to move in a different direction. And also I really just enjoyed the magical space that he created through his incantatory reading that made me feel like poetry really does come alive when you hear it read aloud. So I'm grateful to you all for coming to be part of this experience. So I personally went through some big changes in the past few years, so I wanted to share, and it has taken my poetry in a different direction as well. So I wanted to share a couple of those poems with you. Okay. Sorry. Storm. I carry a bag full of feathers on my back. Ha ha ha, bent to the ground. Please, I beg. She takes the bag. Aquamarine eyes flash what I can't know. It starts to rain, umbilical rain, like in the tropics. Should we have stayed at home and thought of here? Wind kicks up. Insects swirl, feathers. The clock ticks and ticks at 10 o'clock. At Thanksgiving, a woman says, blah, blah, it's my personal mental ward. And we all laugh, ha, ha, ha. I wish I could be dour on the job, wry, my revelations secure. The story is the same, marriage come to an end. I hear the train crashing through the dark, urgent, passing me by. Paint pressed between leaves, butterfly, my heart, her legs wrapped around me at dawn. Cinnamon mixed into butter, dust on my fingertips, like silk in her hair, I rub my lips, taste the Black Sea. If the field were here, the dew would catch the cuffs of my jeans. I might snort dandelion seeds. If I sneezed, I might levitate. In fact, I do. Out in the storm, feathers swirl. The rock in my pocket whispers, bon ami. I shout, butterflies, fly away, ride the wind. So I'll finish with this last one, titled Equinox. Powdered smell, yeast and sourdough, tomato and olive loaf, fresh baked, rock, pebble, node of pain, boulder. I shake hands with the merchant in lieu of payment. That was my timer. I shake hands with the merchant in lieu of payment, palm to palm. Wings announce my passage. 100 birds beneath the apple tree. Early autumn light through rain. Not rock, but needle, dowel, sword. With a wedgie I climb the hill aroused. The linden whips in wind and bends, seeds spiral, few set to thrive. I'll steep its nervine tea for sleep. There had been others, bricks bearing down. I carried them. Choking paint smeared my throat. A few lies and la-di-da balloons. I waved my magic wand, and since the children and my love believed in me, something like starry night flew forth. My love said, I have some extra kefir bacteria if you want some. I laughed until I bloomed. I will dance under her thumb come evening and at dawn. Some straddling is going on, this teetering of night and day, dark, light, like when I sat in a wind and rain-hewn rock, just a kid, looking out on the hills of Santa Fe, red ants, yucca, and the yellow Texas rose. Boulders wear to sand each grain flown. Voila, I declare, while she says nothing. The balloons agree, nodding yes, yes, bread on the counter, cheese and tea.
Introduce.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm sure that after we're both done, Melina would love to take questions as well if you have any for her. And I would recommend jotting them down as you think of them, because I always freeze at the last minute when somebody says, do you have any questions? I'm like, yes, but what were they? You know? So if you do think of a question, I'd encourage you to jot it down, and I promise we will not go on forever in answering them. We'll just try and get you some thoughts quickly. Okay, now I'm about to do my little dance that straddles telling you to stop trying to understand poetry, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, trying to help you understand poetry. So that's kind of the dance that I do. So if I look like I'm tap dancing, that's why. So let me start with my big disclaimer, which is to help everybody put their ego aside a little bit, because it gets in the way, I think, in reading poetry. We all get wrapped around the axle, to use one of my husband's wonderful sayings, thinking about poetry, because since grade school, it's like you're supposed to get it, right? You're supposed to understand it, you're supposed to decode it, and there's something wrong with you, or you didn't pay attention, or the person was an elite jerk, which may be true, who wrote it. But what I want to encourage you to do is to think of it like looking at a painting or jumping in a lake. And I would no more expect you to understand, my students have heard this speech, a poem or explain it to me than I would expect you to understand or explain to me jumping in a lake. Okay? So hopefully you can just be with the experience. And I kind of give this disclaimer because these poems they're hard. There's no other way to say that. They're different, and they're compressed, and they piss me off for that reason. And this book is not a great book to read from. So that's part of why I'm giving this disclaimer. And the other thing I want to say is that I just read a wonderful essay, or a wonderful interview with one of my previous mentors, Jim Galvin, who said that poetry mediates between us and what we don't understand. So if you don't understand, go ahead and be proud that you're feeling that mediation occurring. So those are hopefully two ways to help you with your tantrums in your brain as they occur, because I know I have them as I read these poems. Okay. So I'm going to read from this book. It's called Manual for Extinction. So it's a manual to help us work with what we don't understand a little bit, I think. And this is the opening poem. The first poem I wrote in this collection actually doesn't exist in this collection anymore. The editor and I both decided it stank, so. Okay, but this is the first poem that made it into the collection. How to go extinct. A bird's mouth is its gape, as when young beg. No one let us go awry. We just got some heavy focus on and failed to write home. We found a pasture and delivered ourselves into it unprepared. We found things happen before our hands untwist the wire. I'm a big birder and a bird head, and my birding mentor one time, I said, why are we counting rock pigeons? Why are we counting starlings? They're everywhere. They're not going out of style anytime soon. Let's record the numbers of the rare birds. And he said to me, you have to record them before they're scarce. I thought that was so beautiful. So that's where this title comes from. How to number the abundant things while they're still abundant. At the field days of desire, there was a booth for shooting skylarks. Sometimes rhetoric is just a lone stud horse. 3 forests, one untouched, one logged, one raised, sustained the same birds, but not the same beetles. We must make endings meet. This is a place called Earth. I hurried to the fence and said, I too wanted a horse. How to keep your eyes on your own mat. Any of you who have done yoga know this is a really important skill. Got to be able to keep your eyes on your own mat, or the practice of yoga doesn't help you get anywhere. Okay. It would have been better if he'd hung from a wire in this grief of a city. Just plainer iterations, space, and its companion calf. There's an armory or town hall if you're fragile and stupid enough to home, pigeon style, beautiful, aristocratic, and is likely to die as fruit. That's where limbs sign off. Forage elsewhere for a new ancestor. And the thorax, forsaken, asks simply, am I invited? One must sometimes come to the runt, which once released races out to slake the cold that is the hunger of reindeer. And I know we have some folks from a class that's looking for connections with literature and social movements, so I tried to get my social movement poems in tonight. How to factory farm. Created and stung, the body's task was to be middling, where it could remain safe. So the body set its heart on becoming a government, with enough bad backstory to make a good novel. Ruby Foreman's job was to pick up chicken heads. She forgot how many she'd held at the end of each day because numbers numbed her. No matter how many times you count, you still have to cram your tenderness down their throats so they can die well, as with a prayer or a flash of heavy silver from the generous, heaving water. How to get out of inverted staff pose. Another, if you know that pose in yoga, you're like, yeah, how the hell do you get out of that? But you don't have to know what that pose is. The one thing I want to say, though, is that the poem is right justified, for those of you for whom visual concept makes a difference, and it's a mirror. So the center of the poem is kind of the point at which it reflects. So you will hear some repetition, but it's in mirror order. And you can't be anything other than whole. Then the busting of the ribs, then that was imaginary. Ask a partner to tip you over. If a beast can cross a meadow, if you cannot be ruined, if your body is a blade, if you cannot be ruined, if a beast can cross a meadow, ask a partner to tip you over. Then that was imaginary. Then the busting of the ribs. And you can't be anything other than whole. This poem is called Hydraulic Fracture, and anybody not familiar yet with this? There's laughter, but it's okay if you're not. Hydraulic fracturing is a process to extract natural gas, and it's extraordinarily violent and costly in many ways, both to the atmosphere, to the water supply, to people's health. and it's a very, very short poem, so good luck. Hydraulic fracture. Name the blaze, bear it in a box. My father's tourniquet makes an oarlock. Racked with possession, we row on land. How to get to Wounded Knee. We dangle a pledge before the gathering sky. The drunk stands still as a post, and the sky begins to whine like a huge hurt dog. Oaths flap unreceived, their guarantors even having gone. Here is a heath hen egg. Go ahead, try to photograph it. The heath hen is extinct, by the way. Should have said that. How to be extinct. All the banging became coherent, like subtitles siphoning ocean into a bowl. What can we subtract to expose substrate like $1 billion tomb? Sometimes you. Then I see the footprints in the dregs are avian or a moth's. Often we remove with partial success the competing heartbeat. Have you ever spread someone's ashes with your hands? I take mules into the stable of my heart and wonder why there are so precious few escapes. How to play the most beautiful quartet in the world. To step on a fox tooth or a fishbone on the railroad tracks and not know what it is opens one vein in an evening that wasn't there before. One more place for blood to go. My sister is not the queen, but she is one such place. In every student, there's a teacher causing problems. Like a statue you sat on and didn't have the heart to let anyone know. You stayed seated, present at the bridal shower, like the shuttle launch the Mars fanatic somehow forgot to calendar, but it happens, and brightly too. Rescued or not, with binoculars, one can learn a bird's field marks all right, though one may never be great at reading the sky. There's a really long pseudo-Scottish poem, and I'm not going to put anybody through that. Including myself. How to become pregnant. That is what I'm going to put you through. How to become pregnant. Just under the soloist's gaze is a lens-shaped cloud. It is the arc in the sky where mountain turbulence can kill you. Pilots patrol the outer reaches. Part of the arrangement is they know little of what they protect and maintain. I heard Maria Callas sing twice, once over the noise of a car whose driver was trying to shake me from his heart. The driver's ed instructor would have explained that my choice to listen at that time threatened our well-being. How to disappear. If we do this anymore, it might buy the farm, and us skinny owls in a shed. But love, labor's only labor which is lost, and lost only lost which is watched. It's a little mind bender there. Uh-oh, more pseudo-Scottish? Nope. Okay, I'll do this one just for fun. How to nail the DEC. So anybody know there were reports of mountain lions in the area, which is odd because they're not native. So it's kind of exciting to be able to really plug it to the DEC to be like, you put them there, didn't you? These aren't your deer, overpopulated, just. So how to nail the DEC. All the rescued yard life got away. I paged you and lied when you didn't get there in time. Where would I have started? They called it a mountain lion and went home. Is he moving towards truth here? Yeah, but he's dragging his bag, said Geraldine. We are full of unchecked deftness. Motion sensor systems send us mid-stride shots of fawns, the empty dark, and then, at last, 7 panthers in horse heads. Locals will get that. Good, okay. How to be alone. Hot wind moves through fall's bleached palette, lying lightly over spring in Paso. A total of 7 vines saw their second summer. Of those, 1 was lost to birds, happy, ingenuous orioles who knew the net was poorly draped. Their family shook flowering tree. And that's how to be alone. I just want to remind you. It helps me to be alone. If I know there are some orioles shaking a flowering tree, that's for damn sure. Okay. Sunsick. Hair falls, harp notes cut above a slow drain, does not land. Down and down a downy O, sigh for a shroud. I can make no wool. Can I have your hairs to keep? Can I hold your middle? Can I tell you I'm a sheep? No, then try a fiddle. I'm quaking by the bedrock. I'm buying by stacked stones. I'd gone acres quartz before I knew there was no shade in the satchel and no shade for the bone. How to lay the tracks behind the train. And this is kind of a love poem. Around the time you gave up ancient monoliths, I became ancient and monolithic. I want to filter into your crowd of regular sunlight like regular sunlight. In the war, you would have made it home. I think you would have seen ghosts. Let me see them. You're like, that's a love poem? The poor guy. You can give your condolences over there to the gentleman in the gray coat. Just a few more from here, and then I'm going to read a little prose. All right. No, we're not going to do that one. Sam said I should, but I'm not going to. Okay. Total agreement. This is in 4 very short parts. 1. The Pratt and Whitney wasp has a human sound. 2. Not many aphorisms survive, in none to a tune you'd know. 3. Atrocity stops to sing a song in a valley full of larks. 4. A copy of a wolf and the wolf itself are the same if you draw them both. That's another one. I'm pretty tricky. Okay. How to redeploy. Oh, social movements, people. How to redeploy. We saw a killing field, a ready to do, grabbed up our hands full, weighed rancor, and sailed out. The demographics of the sternum, now that they're present and sober, become a worried cross-sea, like a race of porpoise saving itself. And people say, why do you write poetry? Like my husband, why can't you write novels? So here's how to abandon prose. If you can scoop names from your mouth like minerals, you are a quarry where one can see the earth clear as a bedroom. She has an agate somewhere. There won't be an autobiography. She knows her collection so well it is no longer hers. Just a couple more. One more love poem, and then a bird poem, and then 2 ending poems, and they're all pretty short. Okay. How to drown in 4 inches of water. They lowered the lake level before we could trailer her out off her keel, and 1,000 said and unsaid things. Where's the submersion that would seal the summer in a hissing lunge like a hot iron into water, leaving its color behind? The sailboarders stay into November, with only each other's pennants and the shallow water to crisscross. That's how big the whole world is, punctuated by waterfowl tough as Jack Dempsey. It turns out Muhammad Ali was really funny. Maybe we can watch that documentary. I never wanted to love anything more than your swanky frame. This is a little prose poem. We've been talking in class about lineation, so here's one with outlines. How to Go Extinct, and this is dedicated to the ivory-billed woodpecker, which some of you may know was perhaps hopefully, rediscovered in Arkansas after having been thought extinct. And something you need to know is that the word kint here refers to the ivory bill itself. It's after the noise that it makes. It kind of sounds like kint, kint, like a that kind of thing. Sometimes sound effects are the only thing that we'll do. And they also called it the peckerwood. I did not make that up, and I'm not being obscene. Okay. How to go extinct for the ivory-billed woodpecker. Cecil's kints took up a lot of time. Why couldn't a grown man pack it in? People sat on his porch trying to find out and left with a story about a mule. He had every drawing of the peckerwood anyone could have. Cecil knew Rod Billings shot some in the 20s, a mated pair, and never found the tree again to see if there was a nest. The skins got him cash from a collector and a piece in the paper. Cecil heard the truck gutter out, and his head filled with static. Up to his neck in swamp, he sometimes saw incisions in the sky faster than a wood duck, and felt the back of his eyeballs go cold with the effort and desire. Two more, and then I'll do a little prose, and then you can just dream happily of poetry tonight. However full we may seem, knowledge dolphins through us like shrapnel through deer. In the A-frame, a projector flickers. All is not gathered. I jury-rig the truck. We are capable of waiting. If you must be a planet, oh, stand near the house. And this last one is called Ithaca. It's the last poem in the book, but it's spelled with a K. But I also live in Ithaca, so. And it's dedicated to, it says, for Martha, the last known passenger pigeon. She died September, help me out here, September 1st, 1914. Maddie might have remembered that. So poor Martha, yeah, September 1st, 1914. I'm rolling in the truck bed, wound in wire. I can't recall any jokes, so it seems I shouldn't be naked. Across the trestle, low as a grouse, one hears rumors of freight. The spring crow grows strong. The hoarder's hands flutter and chime with coin. I want more, said the great Odysseus. The singer has forgotten that in many other parts of this song. So that's it for poetry, but I'm going to read briefly. The reason I'm doing this is that good poets, like Melina, always have new poems that they're working on and can share with people, and I don't. And I was actually talking to Pioche the other day, and he said, well, you have new things you can read, right? And I was like, oh, yeah. I really don't. So, and I thought, well, why don't I? Come on, Manring, get on your game. And the reason I don't, I realized, is because I've been working on a novel. So that made me feel a little better. But this novel is sort of centered around the issue of hydrofracking, of hydraulic fracturing. And there are a lot of different perspectives that come in. And so I'm just going to read a very brief chapter on, it's just a section. That, well, you'll see. But all you need to know is that the novel sort of works around hydrofracking, and that process poisons both the water and the air around these sites. She was a sapwood yellow-green, as so many are. The faint gathering of light tips on her secondary coverts made a line of color across her wing, not unlike a plow's line in a wet field, or leaning wheat after hard weather when it comes together and makes shapes. Color shapes also gathered behind her eye, almost vireo-like, but not so distinguished or organized. The pad of her cheek feathers was the shape of a ginkgo leaf, even though she'd never seen one and never would. As for the two males nearest to her just then, one south and one a little off-south as they worked in the dark air, one was young like her, also leaving the place and time of his birth for the first time. The other was deeply colored in a slaty but glowing blue with white ornaments, and gave regular tsp calls every 100 wing beats or so, which seemed to organize her own heartbeat. They'd been working for just over 7 hours this time. When the sun with its silence changed the sky, before even it knew what it was doing, they would come down out of the air, faster and harder than bodies that weigh as much as a milkweed pod should be able to. They wore wet cloaks of exhaustion that only the traveler can know. They would go, all of them, to sapling branches that did or did not bend with their afterthought mass and wait for the insects to stir and climb a little after dawn. Then it was not sleep that they'd gather, but one tiny insect body at a time, 1 or 2 every minute, until their own bellies stopped piercing them with the urgency for fuel, which sometimes never happened in a day. Sometimes the hunger drove her all the way through the daylight until they gathered to leave, suddenly like a bouquet of rushes thrown into the sky. The dark male took a single hesitating flap. She felt her body release and descend, her kind all around her living the same motion. They were landing early. She was troubled by the pull of the south like a current or a wind, though there was no wind just then, which was why they hadn't gone as fast or far as last night. They were stopping early, and the southing wasn't done yet. But the dark male was landing, and they were all landing, and there would be no food until the light came back, always at exactly the time her organs began a slow pulse, like the squeezing of a sponge to tell her so. And then they weren't landing anymore. They weren't arcing and cascading in the rushed calligraphy of hunger. They were just falling, numb and hot, no air. Her body was crashing against itself to find air. For 7 hours it had continuously made the equivalent of a runner's 4-minute mile, and now it was saying it could not breathe for her to pay back this enormous debt. It was fast. Dying, compared to the work they had done, was easy. Compared to finding food or clinging to a wet branch through a 14-hour storm, or digging herself out of the egg hour after hour before she could even know why, ending was quiet and quick. Because her body could not keep living, she stopped. 689 warblers of mixed species were found on the ground, apparently unharmed but dead, outside a small town called Rigby in southern Pennsylvania. They looked, the farmer said to the news anchor, like assorted candies spread across his lawn, or maybe like those flowers, the ones people toss at the bride when she leaves. That's
Okay, so Melina and Caroline will answer any questions you have for a few minutes, okay?
Which you already
So
got
those of you who've been writing them down, right? So here you go.
Oh, come on, make one up. But we can do a selfie. Get a picture here. You have 1 second to think out your question. There you go.
I already told you everything, but yeah, go ahead.
Where do you guys do most of your writing? Like, where do you feel most productive?
Sure. You mean like physical location? So I spent a lot of, I read Virginia Woolf's The Room of One's Own, so I endeavored to have a room of my own. And it takes more than just actually having the physical space. So in my previous home, I had a room of my own that became just a place that was not a place that I could work. So in my new home, I finally do have a room of my own. And I firmly believe that objects, magical objects, are useful to keep around you. So I spent many years collecting found items. I have objects that belong to people who are close to me, toys, and a little station where my children can play quietly while I'm working. But they're not allowed in there very often, so it's very special toys that they get to have. So that's where I work generally. But I think you can work anywhere. I don't think you should overthink it and try to make it too special. So just, write at the coffee shop if you need to.
Yeah. I was going to say, maybe that's why I have trouble writing. I do have a room of my own and you will never find me in it. I'm usually by the fireplace or getting chewed on by parrots or pooped on by birds in our, what we call the aviary. So on the backs of napkins, in the margins of things, on pizza boxes, whatever, and yeah, so I don't have a room of my own, and I don't write that often, so it works out, I guess. When I do write, things happen. So I do a lot of, I think, marinating. And then so it doesn't matter much where I am when it happens, because it's already kind of happened. It's just scribbling and bibbling. If anybody's seen Amadeus, that's one of my favorite quotes. He's like, oh, it's in here. It's all safe in my noodle. The rest is just scribbling and bibbling. So for me, it's maybe a slightly different process, but I think we probably agree that it can be very helpful to have a place that gets you going, but don't cleave to that. I would say don't worry if you can't be there. Lightning strikes anywhere. Any other questions? Yeah.
What are you guys reading right now?
Good one. Go ahead.
Let's see if you have.
Okay.
You go first.
I'm reading Americana by Ngozi. Help me out here. No, what's her first name? Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The Nigerian author. She's pretty wonderful. It's a long book though, but I'm wading through it, and my world's getting bigger, which is what I hope for when I read. So that and whatever poetry books the students leave behind in the poetry library when I force them to take books home.
So I'm reading Marianne Baruch's Cadaver, Speak Cadaver. She was a poet who came to the program where I was studying poetry in Alaska and inspired me through her craft talk. She read this amazing nonfiction piece that she had written. Her school gave her support for studying, just taking some classes for fun. So she took an anatomy class where she got to dissect human bodies, and then she took a life drawing class, and then she generated some work based on that material, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, Dal.
What inspired you to write the book in a how-to manual format?
Oh, God. I guess that would have to do with the process, which was very messy and had to do with writing for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. There's my 15-minute rule, guys in my creative writing. For 15 minutes every night I would write utter crap. And then maybe a week later I would go back and take out what worked, and somehow the how-to tag felt deeply appropriate for that, because I would understand as I was looking over it what I was trying to teach myself how to do. And I would say, oh, this was how to do this, And some of it's cheeky, how to get out of inverted staff pose is cheeky, but, that's how do you get out of a really contorted place? That's in that moment, that's what I was trying to teach myself to do. So I was actually just looking at it and saying, what was I trying to do? This was a manual on how to do or feel or be or not be this. Does that help?
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I love you too.
What else? Anybody? Yeah.
I think you might have just answered my question, sort of, oddly enough. But I was going to ask both of you, there seemed to be, when you spoke of the poem that began the project that was that book. Your book is clearly kind of a project in some sense. At what point do you know you're working on a project? Like, at what point does it turn into, I'm writing a poem, and then go into, oh, this is part of a longer project that is a book?
So for me, it was less a spiritual process and more of just a reckoning. Like, I knew that I wanted to have a book, and I knew that I had a bunch of poems, so I sifted through them looking for the nucleus. And the part that was spiritual, you could say, was finding the nucleus that had a heartbeat, something that felt like I could obsess about it for years and not get tired of the project. So I also had other nuclei, which occasionally I'm thinking, well, are those really nuclei? Should I go and finish those books, or are they lost and forgotten? But I've gone on to other things. So I think I picked the one that was viable. That was terrible series of metaphors.
Worked well.
I'll continue that tradition. I'm really glad you phrased it the way you did. You said, when did you realize you were working on a project? Because I've spent a lot of time proselytizing, telling people don't work on a project. They're bunk. They're horrible. You know, because I think there's a possibility of forcing yourself to do something that isn't there. So I had to let that arise, and I guess when I started naming them as how to, I realized it was a project. And for me, that was just finding the most honest, the most honest place that seemed to continue throughout, and that was the how do I do this? Yeah. So I like how you phrase that though, realizing you were working on a project. I think that's ideal. It's really great.
Can I just add a little bit to that? I got sick of the project while I was working on it because it really takes a lot of effort to get through it. So I felt like I had to invent new interesting constraints that would help me get obsessed about it in a different way, which is how I discovered Darwin and his letters and explorations, and then there were, you know, other themes that I started looking at, and then formal constraints that I would give myself to just keep working on it and get it done, because it's a little bit like writing a paper and then having to revise it, and then on top of that having to go back and do your works cited page. Like, it just never ends, right? But you have to continue to be dedicated to it and really work through it all the way through. So it's a labor of love and obsession and stick-to-itiveness.
Daniel?
We may have just kind of spoken to this, but so once you realize that you have a project on your hands, like, does it make it harder to be inspired to write poetry because then you're worried about fitting within the realms of this project, or like, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Did you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. So I would give myself permission to just explore other avenues a little bit, because I felt like I needed not to get myself bogged down and bored by my project. So I would allow myself I would get into another art form, like play the guitar for a while, or do a little drawing where there was no, in those art forms, I'm not emotionally invested in succeeding in them, so I can allow myself to be loose and free in a way that I'm not with the others. And then also just writing other poems that would come up and just, you know, tabling those for a while, because maybe there'll be something else sometime.
Do you find like maybe sometimes do you kind of stretch, you have an idea of what your project's going to be, and then you maybe tweak it a little or kind of make it a broader idea or focus it in a different way, like your idea of your project changes as your process of writing progresses? Does that make sense?
I try to stay as oblivious as possible. I really do, because when I get thinking too hard, bad stuff happens. So I try to think only as the polish layer. And the rest I really try to keep almost feeling like you're channeling or quoting someone, or I don't want to over mystify it, because if you don't feel mystifying when you're writing, that's perfectly okay. And I don't think it's coming straight from God or anything like that, but I do try to not think about it too much for the very reasons you bring up. And I also do a lot of avoidant behavior, like what you're talking about. I do a lot of, well, those of you who follow me on Facebook know that I'm obsessed with Ukrainian egg making right now, and I think that has something to do with not working on the novel. And projects also scare me so badly that when I finished this one, I wrote in a different genre. So, yeah, you're on the right track asking those questions. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's a recurring
Challenge in the writing process. Do you want
A recurring challenge?
Challenge in the writing process.
Yes. There are many recurring challenges. I think it's really great if you can develop a writing habit where you just have a routine where you do it. So one recurring challenge I have is that I will stop writing for periods of time because life just gets in the way. You know, I'm dealing with the kids, my job gets too busy, so I suddenly have 3 jobs that I'm doing instead of just one, and I feel like I have no more free time. So then getting back onto the wagon is what takes a certain, like I have a routine for it now, you know, like if you're depressed, you can listen to happy music to get happy again. So I always promise myself that I can start at the beginning again, that I did it once. I can always go back to the beginning and start again. So usually what I do is just take out a journal, do some free writing. Sometimes I'll just look for writing prompts that look exciting to me, and I'll take all the pressure off. I'll say, it doesn't matter if this is horrible. I'm just going to let the ink flow. It's like your 15 minutes of crap, whatever. So that's sort of the key blocker.
That's a technical term.
Once I feel like for me, generating new work is the biggest challenge. Once I have new work, I enjoy the process of revising and spend, years on that process if I have, a few poems.
Yeah, what she said. No, really, I mean, just writing is hard. Getting myself to write is extremely hard. It's like trying to get the fork in the grape, just like every time. So you either get creative or you don't write. People say, what do you do when you have writer's block? I say, I don't write. I do something else. So my life is full of doing something else, and then I just try to trust that when it does happen, that I will be a good person and really work hard when it is happening.
Well, and if you're a writer, when you're not writing, you're suffering, right? Because you're not doing it. And you wish you were doing it, but you're not doing it. So then you're turning into a neurotic person who isn't self-actualized, right? So I don't say that I have writer's block and I'm not doing anything. I say I'm filling the ink well. And I thank my mother for that metaphor, because I do think that writers need downtime, and you need time to just absorb images, experiences, travel, meet quirky people. You never know what's going to recycle itself into one of your verses, and so you have to be open to that too.
Yeah, living well often is writing well, and writing well often is living well. So I try to do one when I can't do the other, and that seems to help a lot.
Great. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you so much. Both of us have our books for sale back there too, if you're looking to pick one up. So. Good night.
Thursday. Yeah, not this Thursday. Next year.